one of the great things about this conference is that we hear from such a variety of presenters, and today is no exception. When you start with a well-known economist and you get one of the most well-known brands and worldwide in the industry, in the fashion industry, in Calvin Klein, and then you hear from retailers from Saks to Walmart. You know, all in one morning, and always we include one of the important designers in the industry at this conference, and we usually close with that, as we're doing today. We've had Vera Wang, we've had Tommy Hilfiger, we've had Kenneth Cole, we had Mark Ecko recently, and today we have an outstanding designer, John Varvatos. And we asked students and we asked participants who they would like to hear from, and John's name was at the top of the list. John is obviously well known in fashion since he was designer of the year back in 2001. He started his business on his own in 2000, and a year later he was designer of the year by the CFDA, which you've already heard was the organization that recognized Francisco Costa from Calvin Klein. CFDA also recognized Ralph Lauren and Tom Ford as designers of the year. And John Varvatos in 2005 was the men's designer of the year for a CFDA. 2007, he was the GQ designer of the year. His recognitions and his honors are just too long to list here. And before he did all this, he didn't just start on his own out of nowhere. He was the head designer for men's fashion for Ralph Lauren and for Calvin Klein in two different stints, and he was with Nautica as well. So he's got an extraordinary amount of experience, and now has his own stores, which I'm sure we'll talk about here. But to tell you a little bit more about John, let's run this video clip. So sometimes we do this in sort of a James Lipton inside the actor's studio.
You look format. A little bit better, though.
Do I look a little like him?
You look a little better.
Ooh, well, that's helpful to know. This is inside the designer's studio today, so we're going to do it that way. And so we were talking at breakfast this morning. I said, why didn't you get here last night? Because we were going to have a dinner kind of in your honor to have you here and all that. And then I just watched this video for the first time, and now I kind of get it. So why don't you tell us what you were doing yesterday?
Oh, I guess about a month ago or so, I got a call from Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin that he wanted to have lunch with me in New York, and
that was better than dinner with me, I guess.
Well, I was torn, but I took Jimmy Page yesterday, so yeah, that was a pretty big moment in my life, anyway.
All right, so tell us a little bit about who the John Varvatos customer is.
It's interesting. We have a pretty broad demographic. It's anywhere from probably late teens to, I don't know, Ian McKellen's a good customer. I think he's probably mid-70s, so it goes pretty broad in terms of demographic. But I think all in all, it's a well-educated guy, a guy who's very plugged into fine details. It doesn't mean a price point when you talk about fine details, but the attention to detail. He's into his electronics, his computer, his stereo system, his car, whatever it is. He takes good care of himself too. I think whether he's 55 years old, which I'm approaching, or he's 20 years old, he cares about his personal appearance, and he cares about how he presents himself, and he cares about his grooming. And there's a little bit of rock and roll guy in just about everybody, and we kind of dial into that. Not intentionally when we started, but it just seems to be something that I hit a nerve on, and it's working. And there's whether he's straight or gay, he loves masculine clothes. And I think that's the other thing, is that in the fashion world, in the designer world, it isn't always so masculine. And we've really kind of dialed into doing masculine clothes.
Yeah, and you actually have pretty broad appeal, as you say. I'm probably not your core customer, but I am wearing a John Varvatos tie, I want you to know. And I have several pieces actually. But you did something very creative in opening a store in one of the most famous locations in New York City. It was called CBGB's, and this is a place, Tina and I actually went and met Hilly Crystal when we heard it was going to go out. I said, he can't go out
Who
without...
was the founder of CBGB?
Yeah, he was this guy who used to bring in bands and like let them sleep, there after they performed at night, inside the place. And he was like, known as the guy who took care of the homeless band members. They just went from place to place and were trying to break through, and he kind of helped them out. You ended up kind of carrying on the legacy, if you will, of rock and roll in New York City, where it really began with your store there.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange story how it came about, but I probably been a couple hundred shows over the years at CBGB's, and like a lot of people, was sad that it closed. It had been a shell of what it really started to be in the late 70s. In the last probably 10 years, it wasn't really near the club that it was. But for those of you who don't know what CBGB's is, it was kind of a punk rock and roll club that, launched bands like Blondie, the Talking Heads, the Ramones, and many, many, many bands of probably more in the late 70s to the early 80s. But it has a huge, rich history in music in New York City. And they closed it. We've been open, it'll be a year, this month we're open. And they had closed it. I guess the story goes is I was walking down the street in the neighborhood, and it had been closed for about a year. And I was sad like everybody else, and as a music nut, I'm a bigger probably music nut than I am a fashion nut. I walked by, and there was they had a barricade on the front of the old location, and the door was kind of hanging open. And I stuck my head in, and there was 2 bare bulbs in the entire space that were lighting the entire space. And I walked in, and some guy started yelling at me what I was doing in there. And I said, I'm just checking out what the history was, feeling a little bit of the history here. And another guy walked in the front door and said, "What are you doing in here?" And I said, I'm just taking a look. I'm just feeling the history here again. And he said, "I'm the landlord." And I said, I've been here for like 30 seconds, and I think I want to do something with this place. I never thought about it before. And he said, "What do you do?" And I told him who I was, and he says, "Oh, I'm a big customer of yours." And I guess, I thought about this place, and I thought about the history that it had, and I thought about the people he was talking to in the conversation that I had with him, that he was talking to Bank of America and Starbucks, and they're all great brands and everything, but they're not going to keep the history of CBGB's going there. So I got kind of wound up about it. I left there, I met some friends for dinner where I was going, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, so the next day I walked into my office, and I got my management team together, and told them about the idea, and they all kind of just stared at me, and I said, let's go over. Jump in a couple taxis. Let's go over there. And I walked them through the space, and it was filthy and dirty and falling apart. And it was always that way, even when the music was playing in there. It really was. It was disgusting. But there was still something there. There was a soul of it there. There was something on the walls were still talking. And we went back to the office and we talked about it. And the next day, everybody called a meeting, and they said, financially, it's too much of a risk. The neighborhood's underdeveloped over there. There's no retail over there. My heart was broken. I was like, oh my God. So I kind of let it slide for about a week. And then I got everybody back together, and I said, life isn't always going to be democratic here. We're doing this. And I think part of it was that they didn't really know what my vision totally was. You can put it into words, but until you totally see it, you really don't know what it is. And so long story short is that we kind of left the bare bones of the space there and kind of built around it and, cleaned it up and relit it and did different things to it and brought a lot of interesting things in it. And we carry all of my collections. I do 3 brands, the John Varvatos brand, the Converse John Varvatos brand, and the John Varvatos Star USA brand. We put all those brands in there. We have the first thing you walk into the space is you see a huge vintage vinyl room and then a vintage audio space. And we sell these products as well, and we also sell vintage clothes. And I wanted it to be a cultural space. I wanted it to be a space that anybody could come into and experience music, experience the past that was there and the history that was there. Then I wanted to keep the music alive. So we put together an artist development fund with our profits to constantly have shows. We started off saying we're going to do a show a month, a concert a month in the store. We have about 400 or 500 people attend them. They're sold out every month, and they're free. And we have free beer. How much better does that get than that, But what we do is we promote a lot of up-and-coming artists and a lot of people and a lot of artists that maybe people don't remember or didn't know enough about them from the past, that type of thing. And so from going from a monthly show, we're now doing 3-4 of these shows a month. It's a big undertaking. It's really exciting for the company. It's added a whole other element to the culture of the brand, because we've always been kind of a music-centric company, but it really gave us something that we really owned. And at the same time, we really get to give back to the music community and to people, because we did a big show last Sunday in the store from like 9 to 11 o'clock at night, and my biggest thrill of the whole show, on top of it, was the best one we ever did there, was the amount of people that came up and just thanked me for exposing them to this music. And that whole experience of that is what we're all about, whether it's the experience that we do in our stores or that whole giving back thing was really important to me. So that's really what that's all about.
And it's very consistent with your brand. It's very consistent with your belief that some of this your creativity comes from your interest and investment in music. Obviously, it's consistent with CBGB's brand, and you're driving traffic into your stores, and you're differentiating yourself. You're giving people a reason to come to you that isn't as part of your competitor strategy.
Yeah, it's totally a destination store. It's in the Bowery in New York City, which is not a highly trafficked area at all. You can go there at this time of the afternoon, and there will be very few people at all on the streets, but there might be a dozen people in our store right at that moment, and we just opened up. Because we opened a little later, because that neighborhood gets up a little later, and we open till 9, so we're generally open from like 11 or 12 till 9. But it is all of those things, and it's interesting. It is a destination store, and it's, with all the economics and everything going on right now, we are killing it in that store. It just keeps getting better and better and better, and we're doing close to $3,000 a square foot in that store, which is amazing, which is truly amazing. And we have another store, which is continuing to grow, that does amazing 10 blocks away. So without any cannibalization, we were able to do this because it's a different kind of cultural space.
Right. And it's the heart of what we're talking about today, which is innovation in retailing. You weren't always going to be in fashion. You were going to be a science teacher.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was one. I went to, with like a lot of kids when I went to school. I didn't totally know what I wanted to do, so I said, "Oh, I'm going to get into pre-med." So I went to Eastern Michigan University, and I got into a pre-med program, and I was in it for like 3 years, and I had all these science credits, and I really realized that I didn't really want to be in medicine. I still probably didn't know what I wanted to be, but I thought, what can I do with all these science credits? So I thought I could use them for a degree in education. So I did get my degree in education, in secondary education, in the sciences, and teaching, biology, chemistry, and physics, that type of thing. And I did teach at Eastern Michigan University for a short time. I did teach a chemistry lab there while I was working in retail, because I started in retail, really. When I was 15 years old, I worked in a men's store in the stock room. And then when I was 16 or 17, I got to be on the selling floor. And then I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they had stores in Ann Arbor, so I was selling there, and I worked my way through college. My parents had zero money. So I really had to work when I went to school, so I was working 30, 40 hours a week while I was going to school, so I was in retail the whole time. And when I graduated, and even though I was teaching, and it was pretty cool being a teacher when you're 22 or 23 years old, and all the girls in the class were like asking you for help, and it was pretty great. But for some reason, it wasn't great enough, I guess. And I was really had this kind of leaning towards the whole fashion of it. When I was in high school, and I went to work in this men's store, the whole reason was because my parents didn't have any money. I wanted to get clothes. I wanted to be able to get a discount and get clothes and save my money to buy clothes and that. And back then I wanted to be a rock star, and I had no musical talent at all. But I wanted to look like one anyway. I used to have hair. And so that was really the start of it, and so when I worked my way through college and I was into the clothes and that type of thing, and into the rock scene and that type of thing, and dressing like that, it was like I was more enamored with that whole thing and the whole world around fashion than I really was with the whole school, with teaching in education.
Did you, when you were teaching, did you wear a quilted jacket like you're wearing now?
No, I used to wear like a beat-up T-shirt and jeans, and I looked like every one of the kids in the class, which was totally good. It was like a whole different thing. I was not the standardized, teacher, which was fun. I mean, it was like I said, you were, the kids in your class were basically your age. There was even some that were older than me, which was interesting. But no, it was, I didn't dress up.
Okay, so you had this very safe income. You were head of design for Ralph Lauren Men's. You were head of design before that for Calvin Klein. In fact, at dinner last night, since you weren't there, Tom Murray took credit for your success, even though he wasn't even at Calvin Klein when you were there.
Tom deserves a lot of credit, so I give him that.
But anyway, so you
Calvin.
left that to go out on your own, and that was a bit of a risk if you think of it in those terms.
Yeah, I really, in our industry, in terms of design, I mean, I was really blessed to work for both the two of the biggest American designer names, Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein, and I was at Ralph 2 different times. The first time long story short, I came on in sales in the Midwest. I ran their Midwest sales, and then they asked me to come to New York to run all the sales for the men's company. This is in the mid-'80s. And I moved there and immediately started getting called into the merchandise meetings because I was in sales and had to be responsible for the product. Ralph it was a much smaller company back then. Ralph was in a lot of those meetings, and I really got like the design bug. I'm like, I want to get in design. So I started taking classes at FIT in the evenings is really what I did, and that's really how I really got my education after that in design. And I went for 2.5 years taking like illustration and pattern making and that type of thing. But I was very blessed to work for those guys, and I had a great job when I worked at Ralph in the mid-'80s, and I went to Calvin where I headed up design and started Calvin Klein Collection for men's and the CK brand and kind of revamped the underwear brand and things like that. And then I went back to Ralph, and he gave me the job, which was, for me in this industry, is the biggest job, which was heading up all the menswear for all the Ralph Lauren brands. And I loved it, and I loved him personally, but I think there was something missing, and it was also the size of the company was just complicated at that point in time. It wasn't really as hands-on as I really like really being. You were very, it was almost more managerial to some degree and less creative. And even though I did some interesting things when I was there, I always felt like a little bit of a hole from the creative end of it. And so in 1999, I was at Barney's, New York on Madison Avenue, and walking through the store on a Sunday. And I was looking at all the landscape of menswear brands at that time, and the hot brands at the time were Helmut Lang, Jill Sander, Prada, Gucci, and everybody was black, and everybody was charcoal, and everybody was sleek, and that was great, but I kind of thought like, wow, at this point in time, there's an opportunity to do something totally different. And the switch just kind of flipped. It wasn't something that I was longing for my entire life to do my own collection, although people had approached me to fund me and that type of thing. And so somebody that had approached me earlier that wanted to back me, who was the chairman of Nautica at the time, I called him the next morning. I got to my office. Well, it's even funnier than that. I got to my office. I'm an early riser. I got to my office at like 7:30, and my message light was on my phone. And it was a message from Harvey Sanders saying, just thinking about you over the weekend. If you're ever interested in talking again, I'd love to still pursue that whole conversation about doing something. And so I call him back. I said, I know you're going to think I'm bullshitting you, but I was thinking about you over the weekend too because I'm ready. And in 3 days, we put everything together in terms of what the deal was going to be and how we were going to structure it and that type of thing. And the hardest part came is that I had to go tell Ralph that I wasn't going to be around anymore, and that took 3 months to end. It's kind of like when you're dating someone and you just can't like break it off kind of thing. But long story short, I started the company in 2000. I really did. I went out on my own in 2000, and it was exciting for a lot of reasons. Number one, kind of doing something with your own personality and creating a brand that has its own personality and creating a whole new organization. And then we went into 9/11 right after that. We launched in fall 2000, and shortly after that, there was 9/11. So we've kind of been through some times here since we started with launching the brand and what we're dealing with right now economically out there.
So talk about that a little bit, because you're launching a new brand. You've got the headwinds of that. Getting your own name brand recognition out there. 9/11 follows right behind that. So what are the biggest challenges you faced, and how'd you get through them?
Well, I think money's always a big challenge, but I think the biggest thing that we had going for us is when we launched in 2000, we launched to great applause, I guess, a great from the industry for sure. And we were welcomed in a very big way, which is tough as a young designer, not young, but as a young designer brand, because I started the company when I was at 44. We had big shops at Saks and Barney's and Bergdorf Goodman and Neiman Marcus. They really got behind the product. It wasn't just a couple of racks, but they were substantial shops. So they believed in it from the beginning, and they kind of believed that it was like the next big upscale, I won't even use the term luxury, but upscale American brand out there. Then of course, we hit 9/11 and everything kind of was difficult out there. But we also opened up our own store at the same time when we launched the brand in fall 2000, which is something that just about nobody does as a designer.
No, not just about nobody.
Yeah,
nobody.
Yeah. The first season that you're in business, the first season that when we delivered the goods to Saks, for example, we opened this store on Mercer Street in New York. And shockingly to me, I mean, I expected us to do well because you believe in what you do, but shockingly to me, it was a big smashing success for us. And we also learned a lot very quickly about what worked and what didn't work, and also about what we need to do different to service our customers, and about fit and everything else. And I worked in the store. I worked probably for the first year and a half to 2 years, I worked almost every Saturday and Sunday in the store. We were a small company. I started with 7 people in my company. And then we had the store, so there's maybe between the employees in the store and the design company, and the sales and production and everything, maybe we had like 20 people, I don't know, including sales. And so I used to work in there because I was passionate about it, and I also wanted to learn. And so that was part of the thing, is that I was able to learn, and I was able to move when we were in there, and even during the difficult times, we were able to understand if something wasn't working at Saks, for example, why was it working in Mercer Street? And what do we need to do to present it differently? And how do we need to educate our salespeople there and the people on the floors differently there as well? And so it was a great learning experience for me and for the company, but it also helped us kind of navigate through those difficult times.
Yeah, it really is extremely uncommon for someone like yourself who intends to sell your product wholesale to retailers to open up a store, and the very first year you're doing this all at the same time. It must have been crazy trying to do, left brain, right brain kind of stuff.
It was funny, I was actually the buyer, too, for the store the first season, because we didn't have anybody. I had to hire a store manager. That was as much as, and that happened, like a month before we opened. I started, a couple months before I started talking to people. But so since we had no buying organization when we were doing our buys for, the Barneys and the Bergdorfs and Saks and that type of thing, I had to lay a buy down in for the store as well, just on my gut. And thank goodness I had a retail background as well for it. But yeah, it was a little bit crazy, but it's also a little bit of the adrenaline that drives me in my business, and I think probably drives a lot of people, is being hands-on with a lot of things and really in the mix of it all, and not just being on the peripheral.
You've weathered this current storm better than just about anybody in the men's fashion business in terms of your company's performance. But as you continue to grow, what concerns you the most, and what gets you, turned on? It's people. Really, it's all about people for me. In this times that Terry's talking about right now, last December, when everybody we're looking at those numbers, we had 13% comp store increases. In January, we had 8% comp store increases, and we're in the luxury sector, really, too. And this month's the first month, the month of March, which our month doesn't end until tomorrow, I guess, is the first month that we probably won't have comp store increases. But we're close. We're close, and I'm hoping that my teams fight it out today and tomorrow to get there, that we're that close with it. But it gets down to people. It's all about people with everything. It's great product, great service, great attention to detail, and the attention to detail is not just in the product, it's the way you treat people and the way you present yourself, and so it gets down to people, and that's what I spend a lot of my time with in the company, is dealing with the people and talking with the people and spending time in the stores, and making sure that our people are really looking for the strongest people, because we talked about a lot of things today, and the most important thing in it is really that. It's really people, and it's service, and it's servicing your customers.
And I look back and I say, like, why are we doing what? Why are we doing? The 13% increase was not what we were trending. And in September, we were up 34%, so we definitely fell off as well. But we still trended much better than the industry, and I'm saying, like, why are we trending better? And even in today's world, why are we? And I think it's product, it's, innovation, it's all the things we talked about today. But a lot of it ends up being people, too. It's the people in my organization that make things happen. It's the people in the stores that really treat these customers special. They really make them feel like they're part of the family, and they get them involved in the culture of the company. This whole thing that we talked about at CBGB's, that's just part of what we do, but the other stores that we do that don't really have that flavor, a lot of our customers they really embrace the culture of the company and the culture of the people. And as you grow, the toughest thing is, we're opening up our 10th store, and it doesn't sound like a lot when you listen to all these other quantities of stores that people have, but we're also only 8 years old, and we're very specialized in what we do. It really is, how do you keep spreading that culture, and keep it at the same level that it was when you started? And then also, how do you find those people everywhere that have that passion and have that energy and can spread the word and can get their teams motivated everywhere? And those are the things that I kind of lie in bed as we're going to open up the second Bowery store. I can't say where yet, but we're going to open up the second Bowery kind of rock and roll venue in America, and we think it's something that we'll be able to roll it out. But when I think about rolling it out, I say, like, I need the same kind of people that I have in that store. They make that store. When we were there with Jimmy Page yesterday, I had lunch with him, and afterwards, and he talked about the people in the store. And first of all, we have all these musicians that work there, but they're passionate about the product, they're passionate about music, they're passionate about the brand, they're passionate about taking care of the customers. They're good people. And that's the most difficult thing, and that's the thing that I worry about the most. Not being innovative, I feel like we can do that. That's what I live for. It's really how do you continue to find and nurture those good people out there?
I think that's true, by the way, for all of us. I think people can be a differentiator for our companies, particularly at with the design assistance, but also with the customer experience, for sure. How do you think your brand has evolved since you began with your early vision in 2000 and to what the brand represents today?
I guess with everything in life, you grow up a little bit. When we launched in 2000, although I look back and I still think that was like kind of a landmark season for us. It's the only season that you ever have that you're only doing one thing. You're not working on the second, the third, the fourth all at the same time and dealing with deliveries and quality and everything else. So you're much more focused. So it was kind of like the groundbreaking season for us. But I think we've grown up a lot. I mean, I think the culture of the brand's grown up, the product mix has grown up, the price value that we offer across the different brands that we do. We've also, as Steve was talking about the good, better, best strategy, we have a little bit of that in our own mentality, in that we have the collection brand, and we have our John Varvatos Star USA brand, and we have our Converse brand. And so we have young kids coming into our stores that are 14 years old that have the they have the ability to enter into your world. And what we do differently than I think any other designer brand out there is that we put them all under one roof. We don't do, and I don't knock any of the other people, but we don't do Armani, Emporio, AX, and do different stores, and we don't do Dolce and D&G and all that type of thing. And it may work for them, but when I look at the 21st century and I look at 2015 or 2025, I think the customer, as we were just hearing about Walmart, you want to make it easy for them. You don't want to make it difficult for them. And their lifestyle, it isn't all about just buying a suit and a luxury cashmere sweater and an expensive bag and all this type of thing. It's about the jeans and the sneakers and everything else that goes with it. And when we kind of and again, that was another non-democratic thing in my organization, because they all grew up in the companies that did things kind of rigid like that and kind of in the silos. And when I said, let's try it out there, let's just try it, let's just see what happens when we mix it up. And we saw the surge in the business out there, whether it was at Saks Fifth Avenue or Bloomingdale's or a John Varvatos store. We saw that we let that customer into our store that maybe came in before and said, too expensive, unapproachable, whatever it is that they looked at the product. And it also gave me a different viewpoint in how I visually merchandise the stores, on how I build fixturing for the stores or you know, or the whole atmosphere behind that. And and then my whole marketing campaign, because when we started the brand, we were like a lot of luxury brands. It was all about, you know, beautiful ads and very sensual, and I'm still very proud of those ads. But I think about 4 years ago, I said, you know, there's another part of my life that's in my life every single day. It inspires me in the studio. When you walk into our building that we have, and all the different floors, there's always music playing everywhere. And I said, you know, I want to connect music to it. And that changed us. When we changed that to it, changed the entire brand, because, you know, we've seen a lot of other brands out there use music in their advertising, and we said, you know, how do we do it in a way that we own it for ourselves, that we do it in a very iconic way? And, you know, today classic rock is one of the hottest formats out there today, because there's just not that much good music.
Well, that was just the best music. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
So
so somehow those kids are connecting with it as well. So, you know, it wasn't always done because I'm a genius about it by any means at all. Some of it's just, you know, and Ralph used to talk to me about it all the same. It's like your gut. And a lot of it's been driven by my gut about it, but my gut was that I needed to blend the music and fashion together, and fashion and music have been connected since the 50s, really, and maybe even prior to that, but definitely in the 50s with like Elvis Presley and James Dean and you know, the whole rock and roll starting at that period. In Hollywood, it's been connected with as well. So if that answers the question.
That answered it very well. Okay, but if you weren't in fashion, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
You know, up until the last couple of years, I probably would have said an architect, because I'm totally enamored by architecture. I mean, when I travel around the world, and it's the one thing that if I have a few moments, I want to look at architecture. But when I really get back to my heart and soul thing, I'd be in the music business in some particular way, and I feel like now I am a little bit. And a fun thing that I get to do that I'm starting here on May 5th, which is pretty exciting for me, is that Sirius Satellite Radio and XM came to me about doing a radio show, me doing my own radio show. So I'm starting a radio show. It's going to be I can't have no time, so it's going to be like a monthly Sunday night radio show, like a 3-hour show. But it probably today would be somewhere in the music world for sure, because it's where my real heart and soul is.
Yeah. That was interesting, you know, a little response there. You kind of threw me off there a little bit. Okay, so there's students in the audience, and if you were to give these students some career advice about a career in the fashion industry, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I think the American fashion scene is so much more vibrant today than it's ever been. I mean, when we started the company in 2000, it was a lot easier for me, not to say it was easy at all, but it was a lot easier for me than it would be in 2010. There's no doubt about it. There was many less players in the landscape. In the last 10 years, the landscape of American fashion has really been flooded. And it started kind of with the jeans world and young men's, and really growing in that period. But the jeans world, if you think, you know, just looking at recent research, there's 800 jeans brands in the last 6 years that have launched in America. Just to give you an idea, just from
Is that all?
Yeah,
Is only
that's
800?
all.
'Cause I thought it was more
and
than
you have 753 of them on the floors of Macy's. But just in that perspective, and I just think that it really gave like a resurgence to kind of American fashion. And plus, American fashion is now becoming much more recognized again globally. It was, you know, it really was all about Milan and Paris, and then, you know, maybe London after that, and then it became New York. So it's a time to embrace it. I also think that it really gets down to a lot of hard work, the same thing you'd hear from anybody. You know, it's got to be something that you're passionate about. It's got to be something that you get up every single morning of your life and want to eat, drink, and breathe and sleep. It absolutely is. And, you know, I think about the way I kind of grew up in it without even initially even being in fashion, other than selling before I even went to design school, was just being a sponge. I mean, everywhere I was listening, I was taking notes. I wanted to be in every meeting I could possibly be in. You know, I look at some of the young people that we hire, absolutely have that kind of mentality, and some of them can't wait to get out of there at 6 o'clock or whatever time it is. And to me, it isn't about the hours. It's really about, you know, learning and becoming a sponge and getting as much knowledge as you can possibly get. And And that's probably the biggest thing that I can say is that the hands-on part of it, I mean, the schooling is so fantastic, but the hands-on part of absolutely executing it and learning how to execute it and kind of, getting those scrapes on your knees and by falling down and learning is the most important part of it for sure.
Last question for me, and then I'm going to let the audience ask you some questions. I think a lot of people, when they come here, they would expect to meet a designer who is creative, talented, but maybe a little wacky. And you are creative and talented, but you kind of come off pretty normal, like a normal guy. So I'm sure that's not true. So why don't you tell us something, quirky about you or wacky about you?
Well, I don't think my wife exactly would say that I'm not all that normal, but I'm kind of wacky. But we do have a wacky industry. We really do have kind of a wacky industry. I guess I'm kind of lucky that I kind of grew up on the business end of it a little bit, and so I guess I have a little bit of that right side, left side kind of end of it. But I don't know the wacky thing sometimes, but I'm very neurotic about the detail about everything. That's the wacky side. I guess my people would tell you that I'm relentless about the detail of it. And every time we do a show or every collection that we do, although I'm excited about it, I'm always evaluating immediately what we could be doing better. And I don't think that's wacky, but the music thing is wacky. I guess the thing there is that I'm obsessed with it. I spend all other than I have this beautiful 7-month-old daughter now, which is totally the most amazing thing.
It's amazing, but it's kind of wacky.
What's wacky about that is I also have a 22 and a 24-year-old. That's what's wacky. But I go to a record store, for example. My wife would tell me this is wacky, with her in London, for example, and now she won't even go in with me because it used to be I'd be, you go through the racks and it's A, B, C, D. I'd be on D and we'd already have been there for like an hour and 10 minutes. And she's like, I'm going back to the hotel. So now she just says, you go do your thing, because I'll go to record stores and I'll spend 4 or 5 hours in them.
That's great. Well, that's actually not wacky. And what's really actually special about John is he really does have this tremendous creative talent, but he's got a business brain also. And I think that's really it's rare to have strengths in both sides of the business. I think that's really added to your success in a major way. So let's hear what's on your mind. Who has the first question? Question here. Let the microphones come to you.
Thank you. I'm a faculty in Mexico, and I have some of my students here, 21, and they are also studying retailing. But there is an urban legend in Mexico that if you go into the retailing business before you get an MBA, you won't ever have time to study again. Is that right?
Well, it's like anything. I think it's consuming retail. It definitely is consuming, and I think that. But that's what's great about it. It really is that it consumes you, and there's so many facets of it that do consume you. So you kind of get your MBA in retail, on the floor, in the store, working it. I mean, you really do. That's what I was saying about being the sponge, is that you can get your MBA, but when you really get it is really when you're in the store. That's when you get it.
I agree. Who else has a question?
Hello, I'm Marina, and I attend the University of Arizona. Me personally, I would like to think what you believe are the challenges I would face as an aspiring fashion designer, and what inspires your creativity.
Well, the challenges are what we're all dealing with today, and that there's probably not as many positions in some of the companies as there were 6 months ago, a year ago. But if you're talented, there's going to be something out there. So there really is. I think the cream of the crop, the cream always rises to the top. And I will say that in our industry, and I interview designers all the time, and I talk to designers, and it gets back to what I was saying before, without beating a dead horse on it, is that if you live, eat, drink, and breathe it, if you want to make sure that you raise the bar, the thing I learned from Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren the most is that never be satisfied, always raise the bar. always make sure that you're creating your own personality, that you've got something new to say, those type of things. And so we are dealing with difficult times, and we can talk about those till we're blue in the face, but it all becomes part of what's inside of you then, and what you can put forward. And if you really evaluate what you're doing and the work that you're doing, and really look hard at the quality of the work, because it's not enough in today's world to do something good. There's a lot of really good designers out there. There's a lot of really good product out there. It's about doing something amazing. You have to raise the bar so high that it has to be amazing today. It can no longer be just good. And I feel like that's how when I talk to my team at my company, and we have on Monday, I have a company meeting where we have, I guess you call them the town hall meetings or something. We're going to get everybody together. And we've been lucky. We haven't laid anybody off. We haven't done any of those kind of things. But my thing is to get everybody together to inspire them and to raise the bar and to talk about, yeah, we're good, and yeah, we've been doing better than most, but how do we take it step further? And it was very inspiring today listening to a lot of different things. I took a lot of notes because it gave me good thoughts for my meeting on Monday, and that will fuel my, my presentation there as well.
Yes, over here.
Hi, my name is Chantel Aish, and I'm from University of Wisconsin-Stout. As I was looking at your stuff online, I saw that you've always been a designer for menswear, and that you do have a fragrance for women. I was wondering, are you ever interested in doing a collection for women's wear?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Back in 2003, I think it was just entering our third year in business, I did women's for about a year and a half, and it was sold at Saks in our own stores in Bergdorf's. And it was received quite well, but it was really draining the company. Not so much financially, but just emotionally. We were trying to do way too many things. We had a very small group of people. It was draining me, and I'd come in every morning, and I'd look at the faces, and everybody was like wiped out. And so which was a very hard decision to make for a lot of reasons, including ego, I decided we're going to put it on hold for right now. And when I did that, and I got everybody behind me, and I said, we're going to focus on being the best designer brand anywhere. And every day we're going to come in here and be the best men's designer brand out there, is when our men's band really started to explode. We were doing well before that, but it took it to another level there. So I want to do women's. I love it because the canvas is so much broader that you can do the proportions, you can play, you do something cute for girls, you can't do something cute for guys. It just doesn't work the same way, But I also want to do it when it's right for the company. I don't want to be driven with it just because someone says, oh, it's it's a $200 million business, it's bigger than men's, whatever. I don't want to take our eye off of what we're doing really well right now. I really want to make sure that we keep our eye on it and do it better and keep growing what we have. Because I also think there's something great about being just right now. I kind of changed my thought in the last couple of years. That maybe there's something great about just being the best men's designer, And if the women's thing comes together, it comes together. But you don't have to have a take over the world on anything. Because I look at so many brands out there, and at one time I thought they were great. And then all of a sudden I see them, and they're trying to do way too many things, and they're just not so good anymore. And I'm not that intrigued by them anymore. And maybe they're doing volume for right now. And we've seen it happen with, I'll use Tommy Hilfiger as an example in America, and he's a good friend and everything, but that brand got very big and then went very fast down because they really didn't keep their eye on a lot of things. And I look at it like that, and that's the other thing with not being 25 years old at this point in time, is that I kind of look at it like, you've learned a lot, and you've seen a lot out there, and I watch what's going on out there, and I think focus is a really important thing in your life.
Yeah, I think I was going to say it's a very good message to all of us about the need for all of us to focus, especially in a time like this. Focus on what you're good at, and do that really, really well before you think about doing other peripheral things. Other questions? Yes, over here.
As a contemporary menswear designer, what fellow people in the industry right now who are more up and coming, or who have just really started to make their name for themselves in the last decade, do you most respect? Either for their artistic skills or their business skills.
Well, first of all, in the last decade and in the last few years, I respect anybody in these times that really can fight the fight and try to make it, because it's not easy when you talk about up and coming. Even if you have money behind you, it's still difficult. It's a very expensive industry to get going in. It's very expensive in brand building. you know, my biggest respect goes for some of the people that aren't in the U.S., which is some of like the Belgium designers like Dries van Noten and Martin Margiela and those type of people who they don't even advertise, and they built this kind of like grassroots brands on culture and lifestyle and not by and product. It really gets down to the product. And sometimes in America, we're just so big business oriented that I think we need to take a step back and say, it really, in the end, it really is about product and people and that type of thing, and it isn't just about the numbers. And the numbers are important to me. My partners are a public company. I understand the numbers out there. And I respect people who walk to a different beat. I mean, you know, there's American brands like Tom Brown in menswear who is struggling to survive, for example, because he does quirky things. But I respect him that he's walking to his own beat, because I think that's important. I think the whole premise of having your own personality with your brand is what it's all about. If you're going to last and you're going to be successful, it's not doing a Me Too cheaper or Me Too more expensive or whatever it is. It's really about having something that's yours and that you own that personality and you own that brand identity. And when I read articles about my brand and I read articles about the company and we get reviews on a show, and not every single thing is always spectacular. The one thing that I'm always most impressed by, and the thing that I hold dear to my heart, is that people never use anybody else as kind of a benchmark against us. They never really identify us with anybody else. They always say it's very Varvatos, it's got a very Varvatos look or whatever it is. And to me, that's the hardest thing for all of those designers to do, is to come up with their own personality, their own look that's truly has their own niche. And in men's, it's even more difficult because it's a suit that's got a certain width shoulder and a certain width lapel and a certain length collar and a certain width tie and all those type of things. So you really got to be super creative in fabric and detail and all of that. And when they say God is in the details, it really is about that.
Thanks for your time. It's been great
Thanks
getting
for
to
having
know, letting the audience get to know you better. You really are a very, very talented, successful guy, and you're pretty normal too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.